If you've checked all the boxes society handed you, hit the milestones others only dream of, yet still feel a profound, gnawing unease whenever you're left alone with your thoughts, this video is for you. Here's the truth. You're not broken. You aren't weak, either. Your nervous system is simply overloaded by a world that demands everything from you while offering zero peace in return. My friend, we constantly look for a cure to our emptiness in external achievements, completely forgetting that true stillness is an actual skill. It has to be forged. Today, I'm inviting you to flip through the most private diary entries of Marcus Aurelius in his book, Meditations. These aren't some detached, head-in-the-clouds dogmas. They are the brutal, uncompromising self-reminders of the most powerful emperor of the ancient world. Together, we're going to walk through 5 core lessons to radically restructure your inner strength and build an impenetrable fortress of the mind. Let's face this reality head-on. The vast majority of your suffering doesn't stem from what is actually happening. It comes from the labels you choose to slap onto those events. We have this terrible habit of attaching tragic adjectives to everything we experience. A project fails, and you call it a disaster. Someone criticizes you, and it becomes a humiliation. It's exactly these adjectives that manufacture your pain, not the event itself. An objective reality is inherently neutral, but your cognitive filter poisons it, turning a passing breeze into a raging hurricane. You are, quite literally, inflicting unnecessary suffering on yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't write this book because he had mastered absolute tranquility. He wrote it because he was constantly losing it. He was dealing with betrayal from his inner circle, endless border wars, and a horrific plague that was actively tearing the Roman Empire apart. In the midst of that crushing pressure, he reminded himself, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. He deeply understood that the external world is something we will never fully control. But the power to name an event rests entirely in the palm of your hand. Hurt can only exist if you grant it real estate in your mind. If you refuse to acknowledge that you are being wronged, the actions of others become as harmless as distant ripples in the open ocean. To actually apply this to our hyper-stimulating modern lives, you need a decisive execution protocol, not just vague philosophy. The next time a negative event hits, immediately run this 3-step protocol. Name the event, identify the judgment, delete the judgment entirely. Instead of saying, my coworker is looking down on me, strip it down to the studs. My coworker made a negative remark, this is the fact. And, I am feeling insulted, this is the judgment. The moment you separate the two, you'll realize the judgment is something that can be deleted on the spot. Stop wasting your mental bandwidth trying to alter things that have already happened. Funnel all that energy into purifying your own cognitive filter. The world isn't hurting you. The way you name the world is what's actively destroying you. It sounds profound, but let's be real. Yesterday, someone probably just gave you a slightly annoyed look, and you let it ruin your entire evening. We are living in an era where human value is routinely defined by numbers on a screen or passing remarks from people who don't even know you. The brutal truth is, most of us are trapped in an addiction called validation. I know this feeling intimately, because I fight it myself every time I check view counts or scroll through the comments under these videos. We grind away not for the intrinsic value of the work, but to hear a round of applause. We broadcast our lives not to preserve memories, but to wait for the crowd's nod of approval. But remember this, if your self-worth spikes or plummets based purely on feedback, that's not fortitude, that's a dependency. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor at the helm of a massive empire, wrote about the meaninglessness of fame. Not because he was a saint, but because he felt the suffocating weight of his own pride clawing at him daily. Even at the absolute pinnacle of power, he had to ground himself using a remarkably beautiful image, an emerald. An emerald doesn't become a shade more brilliant just because someone praises it. Nor does it lose an ounce of its inherent beauty if the whole world tears it down. Its value lies in its internal structure, solid and immutable. Marcus understood that the moment you place your happiness in the mouths of others, you hand them the master key to hijack your entire nervous system. External validation is, in reality, a variable you can never manage. They might parade you as a hero one day, and ruthlessly dismantle you the next over a purely emotional whim. If you build your confidence on that kind of quicksand, you will spend your entire life paralyzed by anxiety, endlessly trying to please everyone, a literally impossible task. Think about it. When was the last time you vividly remembered a random insult online, And what exactly is the person who typed it doing with their life right now? Instead of trying to bend the world's perception of you, focus on bending your own moral standards and integrity into shape. Once you have a bedrock of inner certainty, both praise and criticism devolve into harmless background noise. To break free from this leash, run a definitive two-question diagnostic before you take any significant action. If absolutely no one on earth would ever know about this, would I still want to do it? If the entire world stood against it, but I knew it was the right thing to do, would I have the guts to see it through? If the answer is yes, move forward and don't look back. Stop reducing yourself to someone who borrows confidence from public opinion. Learn to be an emerald that shines on its own terms, regardless of whether there's an audience there to admire it. External validation is a nice to have, but internal alignment is a must have. We toss around the phrase, live in the present, like it's some lofty spiritual cliche. But let's look at it through the lens of a cognitive glitch. Your biggest mistake isn't simply thinking about the future, it's that you are secretly running emotional rehearsals for scenarios that haven't even happened. You start dreading a presentation next week, and right now, in this exact moment, your heart rate spikes and your palms start sweating. Biologically speaking, your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a literal tiger standing in front of you and a fake tiger conjured up by your imagination. When you spiral into anxiety, you are forcing your body to pay a real energy tax for a virtual event. Anxiety isn't preparation, it's a glitchy simulation that drains your resources while producing zero tangible results. Marcus Aurelius wrote about presence not to coddle his soul, but to conserve energy as an utterly exhausted emperor. He knew that carrying the dead weight of 10 years in the past or 10 years in the future is far too much for a biological entity designed to live 1 second at a time. When you let your mind wander into catastrophic what-ifs, you subject your nervous system to a level of pain that wildly outscales reality. You cannot solve the problems of tomorrow using the emotions of today. The only thing you ever have jurisdiction over is what is within your immediate arm's reach, the square meter of floor you're standing on, the single breath you're drawing in right now. The reality is, the vast majority of the nightmares we fear never actually materialize. Yet the collateral damage we inflict on ourselves during those rehearsals is entirely real. To short-circuit this state of chronic overload, you have to stop viewing worry as a form of responsibility. Don't fall for the trap that worrying in advance somehow equips you better. On the contrary, it just bleeds you dry before the actual battle even begins. Instead of trying to micromanage a lifetime, deploy the negative narrowing protocol every time you catch your mind booting up a worst-case scenario simulation. Stop and ask yourself, does my nervous system actually need to process this right at this exact moment? If the answer is no, sever that simulation and pour 100% of your focus into executing whatever task is right in front of you for the next 10 minutes. Stop forcing yourself to pay off the debts of the future using today's meager balance of happiness. If you're feeling a little exhausted just hearing this, that's completely fine. It means that, for once, you're actually listening. We tend to romanticize overcoming adversity as some grand heroic journey, but in reality, it usually starts with very mundane, stinging failures. A proposal flatly rejected after months of work, a round of layoffs that wipes out your income, or a long-term relationship that ends in a deafening silence. In those moments, your gut reaction is to curse your fate, but try looking at it through the lens of Marcus Aurelius. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Like a great fire, everything you throw into it, whether it's trash or precious wood, is consumed by the flame to burn even brighter. The difference between a resilient person and a fragile one lies in how they frame their hardships. Instead of viewing adversity as a punishment, see it as a skill accelerator that is forcing you to develop traits you would never bother to cultivate in comfort. A toxic boss is an opportunity to master emotional regulation. A financial collapse is a masterclass in resourcefulness and discipline. If life were always smooth, you'd remain nothing more than a potential version of yourself that was never actually tempered. Stop praying for your obstacles to disappear, because that's essentially praying to remain stagnant. Growth doesn't come from reading books or listening to advice, it comes from a brutal friction with reality. Every barrier you hit is an invitation to display a specific virtue: patience when you're delayed, courage when you're threatened, or clarity when you're surrounded by chaos. To execute this practically, swap your benefit mindset for a skill-building mindset. Every time you face a setback, immediately name 3 specific skills that this obstacle is forcing you to sharpen. For example, patience, when dealing with delays outside your control. Precision, when forced to fix a critical error. Emotional restraint, when navigating an interaction with someone irrational. When you shift the focus from the pain to the training. Adversity loses its power to break you. It becomes a workout in the gym of the mind, where every heavier weight only serves to make you stronger. Adversity isn't taking anything away from you, it's just forcing you to trade up for higher-level survival skills. Most of your exhaustion doesn't come from your workload, it comes from the futile effort of trying to fix the people around you. We waste a staggering amount of nervous system resources getting frustrated by the jerk who cut us off in traffic, the lazy coworker, or the family member who refuses to see our point of view. The truth is, expecting the world to be kind and rational is as nonsensical as expecting a lemon not to be sour. When you get angry, you are secretly admitting that someone else has the power to dictate your mood. Your frustration doesn't change them, it's just a data processing error within your own internal fortress. Marcus Aurelius began every morning with a brutal expectation-setting protocol. Today, I will meet the meddling, the ungrateful, the arrogant, and the dishonest. He didn't say this with bitterness, he said it with the understanding that these flaws are a natural part of the world. Just as thorns are a part of a rose, Marcus knew his job wasn't to argue with or reshape the behavior of every individual, an impossible task, but to ensure that he didn't become infected by that ugliness himself. He chose to be iron-fisted with his own discipline but coldly tolerant of the failings of others. This tolerance isn't weakness, it's the ultimate power, the power of a person who cannot be stained by the world. In the age of online judgment, it's easy to fall into the trap of moral self-importance. We use our standards to dissect everyone else while being remarkably lenient with the chaos in our own minds. Stoicism demands the opposite: be a ruthless judge of your own thoughts, but a neutral observer of the mistakes of your fellow humans. When you respond to rudeness with rudeness, you aren't defending your identity, you are officially becoming a carbon copy of the person you despise. The execution protocol here is the principle of internal discipline, external tolerance. Every time you're about to blow up, ask yourself, am I using my energy to build my inner strength? Or am I voluntarily handing it over to someone I don't even respect? Learn to stay silent and do your job in absolute stillness. Stop wasting another second debating what a good person should be, just be one. My friend, we've traveled through the deepest layers of meditations. At this point, this video isn't just a book summary, it's a test of your own identity. The philosophies of Marcus Aurelius are easy to hear and great to quote, but they are incredibly painful to actually live. Peace isn't a stroke of luck, it's the reward for those disciplined enough to control their own cognitive filter in the middle of a storm. Now, be honest with yourself. When this screen goes black, who are you going to be? Are you going to stay a knowledge hoarder, someone who collects deep ideas just to feel sophisticated, but still lets a single negative comment or a minor inconvenience wreck their entire day? Or will you choose to be a stoic warrior, someone who dares to face the decay of their own instinctive reactions and starts building their inner fortress right this second? Here is your behavioral challenge. In the next 24 hours, every time something bad happens, no matter how small, stay absolutely silent for 60 seconds. Don't react, don't label it, don't judge it, see if you have the backbone to own that 1 minute, or if you are still just a slave to external triggers. The world doesn't need more people who can talk about philosophy, it needs people who live by it. You're either training your inner discipline, or you're just a spectator admiring the idea of it. Which group do you belong to? The choice is yours. If there was one lesson in this video that made you feel the most uncomfortable, leave exactly one word describing that feeling in the comments. Thank you for walking this path with me. I hope you find stillness within your own fortress.